Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Lee Hampton, one of your co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast, here with my fellow co-host, Mr. DBQ Hams. How you doing, DBQ?
I'm doing okay tonight, Lee. Good to be here.
All right, very cool, very cool. So it'll probably be a short show tonight. I don't know that we have as much going on in the news cycle. Obviously, the big thing that happened today was the GTA, or last night, really, the wee hours of the morning, the GTA 6, Grand Theft Auto 6 leak happened, but we're going to lay off of that one a little bit tonight. If you are familiar at all with the show and have been around at all, you will know that quite frequently news breaks, and we kind of like to marinate on it for a little bit of time and kind of see which way it goes rather than leap to be the first to report. We've got time to let this one catch its feet, and obviously the 2K leadership will be in the office very early in the morning on Monday. I'm sure that they've been in the virtual office all weekend trying to figure out exactly what went down and how. So more on that next week. For tonight, we're going to do our regular evening show, and we're going to hit up everything that we've been playing, plus a little bit of industry news. I'm going to start things off tonight. What I got into last week was finally took this year's F1 22 from Codemasters out for a spin on the Xbox Series X. Not too much to report. Game looks graphically good, as always. Tons of actual sport changes this year. Unfortunately, I'm not as tied into F1 as I used to be, so I can't really kind of walk you through all of the car changes and rule changes that have been in place in the actual Formula One season. I noticed that they have some new aerodynamic fittings, some canards that go over the tires. I think that they've also changed some things up on the engine. Pertinent this year, kind of as it was last year. I guess one thing that I didn't see, although I haven't dug around in the menu a lot, so the progression of the series over the last few years is, if you've kind of kept up with it, is there was a point where first they injected Formula 2 into the season, which was kind of a nice on-ramp, so you wouldn't just kind of jarringly get thrust into the F1 season right off the bat. And there were some kind of RPG kind of elements and kind of a story, so to speak, with that first iteration, which kind of dropped you in some situational race set pieces. You didn't drive a full season or drive full races. Then the next iteration was they just let you play out a whole F2 season, kind of as a precursor to your F1 season, out of which your results would wind up with you then getting recruited and getting offers to different F1 teams. And then as the series progressed, I think that was still in the game, but it wasn't positioned like it was. It wasn't kind of right in your face. So I think the only way you could get to the F2 season would be to specifically, identify that as a way that you're going to start your career. I'm not exactly sure because it doesn't natively come up on like the career menu. That has continued this year. So, but last year there was a story mode that was similar to. I don't play NBA 2K as much, and I don't play these modes. DBQ, you do. I always call it the bling your crib mode of NBA 2K because it's oriented around you, taking on a singular personality rather than playing as a whole team or the coach of a team. So you kind of had that last year with Formula One, although I never participated in that. I just played the straight stick career mode. So this year, I'm not even sure if that's in there. It didn't leap right out at me in the menu. And so, as I normally have, I just jumped into it kind of from a pure racing perspective. So I can't even remember exactly. What is in this season is the same thing that it has been last season, which is you can create your own team, and then you become an additional, 2 sets of cars on the grid. You have to manage your budget. You have to manage team activity. So all of that is kind of the same as it was last year. If you guys watched the episodes where I went through that in exhaustive detail. So nothing new there. Basically, a graphical upgrade. You obviously get realignment of the actual Formula One teams and any changes that got made to the track selection throughout the season. So. it's most prominent, I think, is it's kind of a new, most prominent, not game wise, but just kind of in the sport and your participation in the game is, new cast of characters in F1 now. I think we are slightly moving past the Lewis Hamilton phase, and so he is no longer on the cover. It's three new drivers on the cover. He actually only features not very prominently in kind of the pre-roll video, as the game kicks off. So I'll have more to report on that later as the season goes on. I had a great time with it, first time out of the paddock. Same structures last year. The number of training programs is reduced to just 3, whereas it used to be 5. But what they have done is they have rolled a lot of the challenges that used to be present in the other 2 modes, and now those are present in the remaining 3. So I had no problems with the car first time out of the gate. We will see how that goes as I go on throughout the season.
Did you play on PC or on console last year?
I played on both. So more and more is becoming the progression that I will, wherever I start, I'll typically get it on both Xbox and PC. I don't think I've had it on PlayStation since like 2017. But having it on Xbox and PC gives me the ability to to play either, one season going back and forth between 2 platforms or just keeping those files separate. I think I do that through cloud saves. It's not quite as seamless as like playing Forza Horizon is. But I think I just wind up managing it through cloud saves. Codemaster games obviously pop up in Game Pass now that they are part of Electronic Arts. So you are certainly fine if you want to wait. This game will definitely show up there. But it'll just be interesting to see how the franchise progresses as we get deeper and deeper into Game Pass and see what the alignment is going to wind up being between Microsoft and EA, whether or not that's going to continue or it's some type of limited deal. And
it runs okay on Series X in terms of frame rate, fluidity, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, for the last couple years, I think it was in 2020 was the first time that which would have made sense because it would have been the 1 year that there would have been kind of relative parity between the Xbox and PC. But that was the first year that that instance of Formula One was actually typically rated and reviewed as being the superior version. Slightly, it may have been better optimized than it was on PC, and some things kind of in the noise. But yeah, that's why, probably starting about 2 years ago was probably when I started in the 2020 version was when I started playing it on both PC and Xbox because, I went for the Xbox version because it was so highly rated, but at the end of the day, I wanted to play it with my wheel and pedals on PC and be able to kind of apply some of the brute force, that I have, available on some of the PCs in the studio. So let's go on. That's a very short opening segment, and so let's go on to segment number 2. We've just got 3 stories in the rundown tonight. So the first one, 3 Sega Genesis Mega Drive games have been added to Switch Online's expansion pack. This story ran over on Nintendo Life. And I always do this when I'm in read mode. I can't see the author's name. But and I quote, Nintendo has just added 3 more games to the Sega Genesis Mega Drive app for the Switch Online expansion pack service. The latest additions include Alicia Dragoon, Beyond Oasis, The Story of Thor, and Earthworm Jim. Japan has also received the same 3 titles. Now, the only reason I included this story in the rundown was because of Earthworm Jim. I don't even know what those other 2 titles are, but Earthworm Jim...
I was curious about that, because I only knew Earthworm Jim as well. I've looked at these, and the Beyond Oasis one, the sprite work in it looks really kind of high res for the time period. So again, it's kind of simplistic, over the top brawler gameplay in a kind of fantasy like setting, but the sprite work really seems impressive for the period.
Yeah, and I may very well check some of these out. I have been, when I'm on my Nintendo Switch, kind of been changing up, my paradigm on what games I play, on all the systems, really, to make sure that I actively participate in playing things out of the subscription and make subscription services and making sure that I'm getting my use out of those. So, I have definitely spent time with the expansion pack, and grew up as a Sega kid, so those games are much more near and dear to my heart. There is not as much in the Sega expansion pack as I would have liked. That is of, nostalgic yearning. I would love to see Vector Man, right, show up in the service. But and so there's space, as I talked a couple weeks ago, there's Space Harrier and a Shinobi title in there, which is fine. But until some of those other kind of, heralded games from my past show up, it's a nice get for Earthworm Jim to be in there. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the release lineup was. There was an Earthworm Jim that was a 32X title, and I can't remember if they just took the Earthworm Jim and upgraded it to a 32X, or if that was Earthworm Jim 2. But either or, so I don't know if it's the 32X version that's in the Mega Drive now, but that'll definitely be something that I'll eventually check out.
It doesn't look like it. I mean, from what you're seeing, it's just the classic Earthworm Jim. So it was an Earthworm. Well, there's a Sega CD. Was there a 32X? I know there was a Sega CD one.
I think there was all three, right? Which this is part
seems very likely given Sega's very streamlined, targeted approach to game releases and marketing in the mid '90s.
And see why I've been talking so recently about the similarities between old Sega and Xbox being the spiritual successor, right? But yeah, it was not unusual for there to be a cartridge version, a Sega CD version, and a 32X version, which I never really understood why, but as a Sega fan, I just accepted it as such. So, but that'll definitely be one that I check out. Any of these that you see, DB, that will appeal to you and you'll be dipping your toes into?
I mean, Earthworm Jim kind of is a classic that it'll be fun to go back to. It always, from what I remember at the time, it definitely ran better on Genesis than it did on Super Nintendo. I remember a lot of slowdown on Super Nintendo at the time period. But yeah, I think the Beyond Oasis, I'm definitely going to check out just by its art style and art design there. It is interesting because I do own the Genesis collection, which has 30 some Genesis games. So when things like this pop up, it's nice when they are kind of the oddballs because I have other ways to play some of those classic ones like Vector Man. So, granted I paid for that on sale for like $15 at one point in time, but you're right. Like it is an odd mixture in all four of the different Nintendo Online ones, that there's not, there are some high profile ones, but it is not nearly as comprehensive as it certainly could be.
Yeah, I'm hoping that there's more to come out of that and that we've just seen the initial vestiges. I mean, this year we've, finally gotten the question answered as to, when this thing first popped, it was relatively dubious what the overall value to the service was going to be, given the titles that they had in the service. And there was the speculation that, they'll add more over time because that's what they did with the NES collection, the Super NES collection. But those additional drops sometimes came very few and far between. It was never officially stated that was the programmatic intent. And so, you signed up and paid your money and you were just living on a wing and a prayer that they were going to add stuff. But, hopefully that will continue, and hopefully they've got some additional titles. I can't remember, is Earthworm Jim an Activision property?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know who owns it right now. Yeah, I will look as you go on to the next one. How about that?
Okay. Because another thing that would be a big want for me to show up in this service is Pitfall Harry. And specifically, I'm thinking about the Activision 32X reboot. That was really you playing Pitfall, really playing Harry's son, So
it's a Playmates is who was it originally. It was Shiny Entertainment was the developer, and it came out on PC under Activision as the publisher, but on consoles it was not. Activision did not publish it, so it was Virgin Interactive published it in Europe, and Playmates Interactive, the toy company, published it here in the States. But in terms of who owns that license and rights now, that's a good question. Because it seems like if Activision did, we would have heard something about it in some type of re-release form.
Yep, maybe one of those things that may be caught up in licensing purgatory, but so was GoldenEye 007, and it's finally loose. So if somebody can get a hold of this and No One Lives Forever, then I will be a happy puppy.
Be glad if somebody can do something with No One Lives Forever.
Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah, and however you're going to release it, please release it as a combined title with both, just in one package. Speaking of which, Ubisoft has also joined the $70 game train. This story from Push Square earlier in the week. Ubisoft joined $70 game train, Skull and Bones the first. This comes off of the heels of the Ubisoft Direct from a couple of weeks ago. The article reads, but not all games will be that high a price. Ubisoft has announced it's joining the likes of Sony and 2K in increasing the prices of its games. I should also mention EA as well, because F122 is a $70 game. And I actually need to see how much your Game Pass discount is, because I wound up only paying like $45 to $47 for that, and I thought that the discount was less than that. But
the Game Pass discount is 10%, but EA has done things where if you're playing last year's version and you purchase it through there, you can get an additional 10%. Because that's how I ended up getting Madden for 20% off, was that if you follow through the last year, you get an additional 10 on top of your EA Play Game Pass 10. So maybe that's what happened to you.
I could very well be. I definitely bought last year's version. Back to the article. Ubisoft has announced it's joining the likes of Sony and 2K in increasing the price of its games to $70 on PS5. Weird that reads that increasing the price of its games on PlayStation 5. Now that makes me wonder, how much is Skull and Bones, which is a multi-platform title, going to be on Xbox and on PC for that matter? Typically, you see these guys roll them out at $70 everywhere, but it's just strange the way that article is worded.
Ubi has done this with others, or there's a couple other publishers that have done this lately as well, where because they'll release two different SKUs for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, they will up the PlayStation 5 one. But then Ubi did this with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, with, the beginning gen stuff, with Watch Dogs Legion, where because of smart delivery, the Xbox version is Xbox One series all on one disc, and then you get one or the other depending on what console you put it in.
Okay, gotcha. Meaning you buy the Xbox One version and it just natively updates to a Series X version with like the basic enhancements?
I mean, that's the way it's worked, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be that way, right? It could certainly be, it could be an add-on. You could put the disc in, and for the extra graphics pack, you could be spending $10 on the Xbox store. But it is strange that it would call it out in this way. But again, it is Push Square, so maybe they were only reporting on the PlayStation side of things.
That is very true. We will try and dig around for that as well. This will begin with the November release Skull and Bones and applies to the publisher's big AAA games, in quotes. The French company has demonstrated it'll show some restraint, however, as Assassin's Creed Mirage will sell for $50 at launch next year. Is Mirage Mirage must not be the mobile title. How is it significantly different from Skull and Bones in terms of like...
I think Mirage is the one... Well, I know that Mirage is the one that is targeted and kind of framed as the callback to a more straightforward original Assassin's Creed, smaller map, not an RPG, more of a stealth. And so potentially because it is a smaller game, it's being sold as a smaller game, that they're targeting that price appropriately as well, so that it isn't people aren't coming in expecting a 40 to 80 hour experience, that this is a 12 to 16 hour kind of tighter gameplay loop as Mirage.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. I think my overall take on setting of prices, particularly for console games, is I would just set up a single price. Like I wouldn't like this is going to get them. I feel like this is going to get them into dangerous territory because at the end of the day, the lens you're putting on what the valuation of the title is driven from your own perspective on the developer side, and that is not always sync up with the way consumers see it. And so, if you come out and say, well, it's because of total gameplay time or some other metric, and then the one time that your pricing is not consistent with that rubric, right, which you may very well have reasons for, right? You could make an 8-hour game that's incredibly high budget and took a ton of people to make, and you may want to charge $70 for that game, but gamers are going to go off of the precedent, right? Which is
it really boxes them in a corner in terms of messaging. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm surprised as well that Square is putting themselves in a similar spot for this winter where, you have the new release of Diofield Chronicles, the Tactics game. You have the new Valkyrie game coming out this month, both at kind of full price. But then you have the remake of Crisis Core using kind of Final Fantasy VII engine and graphics coming out at $50, even on PlayStation 5. So it's interesting that of all the titles that they would discount the price on, they choose to do it on probably the one that's going to sell the best, regardless of what price it is, versus a smaller kind of new IP or a return to a classic IP that is not as high profile as Final Fantasy.
Well, we often never have anything good to say about Square Enix's financial acumen, by all means. When you say it uses the Final Fantasy VII engine, is it using the Final Fantasy VII Remake engine?
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Yes, the remake engine, it's looking like it's using those type of assets. The combat looks similar to that, but it is the PSP game kind of remade in that fashion.
Okay, very cool. You want to take us through the rundown of the Tokyo Game Show?
Sure. Yeah. So we don't have a lot of news stories, but we've got a whole bunch as we talk about the Tokyo Game Show. So not only do we have things from big publishers, but we also have, there's a few news stories trickling out. Konami is remastering Sokuden 1 and 2. We have more from Sega in terms of Yakuza Like a Dragon series, a number of remakes, releases, and some brand new games coming within that series. But I think what we probably will spend the most time on here is let's run down probably the big three in terms of Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft. There's a little bit with Capcom. They released another trailer for Street Fighter 6. They announced that there's going to be a Resident Evil stream coming in October, confirmed the Resident Evil 4 remake, and some other pieces there. But let's stick with our big three console publishers as well. So feel free to stop me at any point in time, because I don't know that there's a whole lot that we need to kind of deep dive in, but I'll kind of run down a number of things. In addition to Sony's State of Play that they had last week, they had some hands-on with the PlayStation VR 2. We've learned that PlayStation PSVR games for PlayStation 4 are not going to, the PlayStation VR 2 is not going to be backwards compatible for those games. Lots of reports coming out that the headset is very comfortable, the inside-out tracking, excellent kind of graphical qualities. We got some announcements related to PSVR 2, along with things like Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, which was out on Oculus or Meta or whatever they want to call it at this point. There's a Dungeons and Dragons kind of tabletop RPG type of game coming with Demo, DEMEO, which is kind of a tabletop RPG in PlayStation VR. We learned that there's going to be some PlayStation exclusive quests for the Hogwarts Legacy game that's coming out next year. Maybe, hopefully, next year, depending on your preference. Tekken 8 got announced. We know that a game that was announced last year, and we got some gameplay kind of in a platinum combat fast third-person action type of way. Project Eve has been renamed Stellar Blade. We have a new game from Team Ninja, the action RPG Rise of the Ronin. So another kind of feudal Japan, as last week we had the announcement that Ubisoft's next full-featured RPG, Assassin's Creed, is going to, by the Odyssey team, is going to be in feudal Japan as well. We got a deeper story trailer for God of War Ragnarok, and it's still on target to come on down in November. So I'm trying to think of a few other things here. We've got a couple, an adventure game, Synduality, but it was a relatively short state of play. I think people were expecting, given that it was Tokyo Game Show, given that it was announced to come on the same day as Nintendo Direct, the 20-minute state of play seemed a little light from what people were maybe hoping for, but I think it's also kind of realistic in terms of what is in Sony's portfolio at this point that they can show, right? They don't have, outside of Ragnarok, they don't have a whole lot kind of coming that's exclusive. And so this gives them a little bit here and gets some of that hype build back up for PlayStation VR 2, which is slated to come in 2023. Anything that you saw out of state of play that made you take a second look at, Lee?
Quite a bit, actually. So one thing to point out about the PS1 versus PSVR 2, PSVR versus PSVR 2 controversy is the PSVR 1 headset does work with the PlayStation 5. So your solution to backwards compatibility is to play on your PSVR 1.
Yes, I think it's much more about not getting the enhanced tracking, the better screens, right? Like, yes, you can play them and have the faster processor, but you're still kind of limited to hooking up that other camera, playing with the decade, well, almost 15-year-old technology in terms of the Move controllers. So I think it's probably more of the uproar. I don't even know that it's a controversy, right? Like it's not really that surprising. It's a significant jump in technology. It really seems reasonable. And for the install base on the PlayStation VR, for devs to go back and patch that and make it work, the cost benefit of that is probably got to be very I don't know that there's a strong enough active user base on many PlayStation VR games to make that time worthwhile when they could be developing something new for a new install base.
Well, that's what I mentioned on a podcast earlier today. It's, around about 5 million people bought PSVR 1 headsets, maybe a skosh over, and that's out of what I estimate is about a 140 million person install base at this point between PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, which is like 3.6%. Definitely does not pass the cost benefit analysis smell test by any means. It's unfortunate for those consumers who are impacted, but I think I see far more outrage than 3.6% people could muster on Twitter. So I think there's a lot of people, claiming outrage who are not actually impacted. And then, short state of play, but I feel like there were a lot of things in the state of play that were good. Synduality is interesting. I am a mech fan, so anytime I see something with people running around in a mechanized suit, I'm always going to look into that. But I didn't get a good enough feel from this gameplay to tell whether or not it's really a mech game or if the mech thing is just a gimmick. Rise of the tons of feudal Japan things. Now that Ghost of Tsushima seemed to prove to the market that it can work, and that you can do a game that is artistically appealing and maybe only a skosh offensive, right, to people of that race and nationality and ethnic background. It seems to be that is the thing that has been causing people to kind of hold their, dig their heels in and pump the brakes on going down that path a little bit, because it was very uncertain on how to do that without potentially offending people. But I'm glad. That's one of my favorite eras of history as a previous history major. I'm sure Swiss is also elated from all the content that he saw from that era. So Rise of the Ronin, and some of the other games coming out definitely pique my interest. People are very happy over the showing of Stellar Blade. It seems like I think there's some happiness from the PlayStation fan base at that game, which was going to be multi-platform, now being an exclusive. And it's not clear whether or not it's a full exclusive or a timed exclusive, at least as far as I know. So, but good. I'm always happy for people to be happy about stuff they're getting. And I think Like a Dragon Ishin was the other one that I was going to mention, that you mentioned.
Do you know who is developing Stellar Blade? I've been kind of going back through and looking at that.
No, I just know it's very Bayonetta, Devil May Cry looking. So I would guess maybe former devs of Platinum, but I'm not absolutely certain.
Yeah, it definitely has that feel to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the Tekken games. I don't know if I've kind of passed that point in my gamer career where that would be something to catch my interest. But, the most recent kind of fighting game that I played was, MK11. And I loved that game. I love fighting games with the little kind of mini movies stitched together and the cutscenes in between with a story mode. And Tekken used to kind of have that. I just don't know. Not so much in between fights, but as you completed some parts of the journey, I think every 5 fights or something like that, you would get a longer cutscene that would kind of reveal some of the background story of a character. So we'll see if they double down on that approach. But
So Project Eve Stellar Blade is a Korean developer. Shift Up is the developer there.
Very cool. Very cool. But yeah, that's it for me for the state of play. You want to hit the Nintendo Direct next?
Yeah, let's go. Keep on the same day. Earlier in the day, there was a Nintendo Direct. This was about 40 minutes. And as Lee said, just because it was short doesn't mean it wasn't good. And just because it was long doesn't mean that there was a lot. Well, just because it was long meant that there was a lot of farming games announced. So yes, the Nintendo Direct, lots of different pieces here. We started off with the previously leaked, rumored new Fire Emblem game, full-on Fire Emblem strategy game, not a Warriors game, so this is Fire Emblem Engage, coming in January. Then you get a lot of games that have been out in other places making their way to Nintendo Switch. Things like It Takes Two, which makes a whole lot of sense that it would come. Tunic is coming as well. You have so many others. Various Daylife was another Square kind of life sim farming game. Various Daylife was out on Apple Arcade. Factorio, which has been out on PC and elsewhere for a while, is also coming to Switch. Then we get let's talk about 1, 2, 3, 4 Harvestella, which is the farming kind of life sim game coming from Square Enix. We have another Rune Factory game. We have a Fae Farm game, which another Animal Crossing Stardew Valley type of game. We'll get some remasters in here. We get remakes of Front Mission 1, 2, and 3 at some point in time. So I think we knew that there was a Front Mission coming, and now that we know that there's a few more Front Missions coming as well. Fatal Frame, we knew that there was a Fatal Frame coming, and now it's still coming later next year. We get a couple sequel announcements here. Octopath Traveler 2, which is scheduled to drop in February of 23. Looks very similar to the original Octopath Traveler. I will be curious to see how much of the characters and stories that they're pulling from the mobile version, because they've been churning out content and characters and backstories there for over a year. Globally on the mobile version, so potentially using some of that content. We get a re-release, remaster, definitive edition aspect of Final Fantasy Theatrhythm. This was the Final Fantasy Rhythm game coming out on the DS. There were 2 of them released. This one is going to not only have over 300, almost 400 songs. It's also going to include some DLC for Octopath Traveler, Live Alive, other Square games along the way. In that same kind of rhythm game aspect, we get, this is the one that is the most goofy and also seems like it could be a whole lot of fun. The Fist of the North Star rhythm boxing game, right? So Bandai Namco, Fist of the North Star, an anime that has been around for decades. Bandai Namco, yeah, whatever. It has been, it's, yeah. For some reason, I'm saying it right, but it doesn't sound right. Bandai Namco. There we go. I was putting the ko in the wrong word. That's why it didn't sound right, because I was wrong. Fist of the North Star. Bandai Namco has released multiple boxing fitness games on the Switch. And so this takes that engine, which is kind of, it plays out kind of like I don't know, like Guitar Hero, but with actions that you are swiping, you're, jabbing, uppercutting, hooking, crossing, and putting it alongside the Fist of the North Star. So I've probably spent more time talking about this game than we ever will until I play the demo and have some funny things to say about it. But we got some more information about Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, that there's going to be DLC including Rayman. Since we're talking about Earthworm Jim, let's go back to our 90s platform characters and continue that. We get some announcements related to Bayonetta 3, which is coming in late October. We get some new DLC announcements along with Xenoblade Chronicles 3 with a new character. We get some more characters, Diddy Kong and Paulina in Mario Strikers. We now learn that Golf for Switch Sports isn't coming until winter. And then we get some information about, just a little tease about Pikmin 4. And they close out with some more. Oh, yeah, we get a lot more here. There is more coming. But yes, we do close out with Breath of the Wild, Tears for the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom? Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. So this is the Breath of the Wild sequel, which is no longer has Breath of the Wild in its name, but is using that landscape. It sounds like, from listening and reading to other people online, that the geography looks to be the same in terms of the world, but there is an additional verticality and some cloud kind of dungeon areas there. So that was kind of the big expected piece. The other big piece, I would say, is the confusion around GoldenEye 007, the release on this Nintendo 64 expansion pack. So the Nintendo 64 expansion pack is getting 3 Mario parties in case one was just not enough. It's getting 2 Pokemon stadiums in case one was not enough. We're getting Pilot Wing 64, Excitebike 64, and 1080 snowboarding, which are all kind of fun. Excitebike is actually a really fun kind of hidden gem there late in its life cycle. And then we get GoldenEye, and GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 online expansion pass is going to be the classic GoldenEye game with online added into it, online functionality added into it, where it's also being released on Xbox, whether it's coming either as a standalone, or if you own Rare Replay, it's going to be added into Rare Replay, but it's going to have some increased frame rates, 4K textures, but no online piece. So you get the kind of remastered version on Xbox, or you could play the online version on Switch. So those were kind of the big pieces here with Switch. I think there's a few other hits here, things that we talked about Crisis Core earlier. That's also coming to Switch. Sifu, that came out on PlayStation back in February is now coming to Switch in November, which is good. It was we get a Tales from Symphonia remaster, Life is Strange, a Romancing Saga. So lots of other pieces here. I didn't talk about the Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe, which is another remaster of the Nintendo Wii version, Return to Dreamland. So a lot within 40 minutes, a lot of remasters, a lot of releases that were on other platforms, and then a few Nintendo-specific nuggets here and there. So a lot to potentially play, but I think it felt like a little bit for everybody, but not a whole lot for any one person. Any thoughts there? Anything that stuck out to you, Lee?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Zelda fan in the world, but the Tears of the Kingdom trailer definitely got the blood pumping when he base jumped off the mountain, and then we didn't see him land on the glider thing or whatever for like several minutes while other cutscenes flashed through. But I thought that was a very Western marketing approach to showing that title, and so that trend of thematic approach within the Nintendo camp is both encouraging and interesting to see them like double down on that. I think. So
do you know if the Japanese Direct had the same trailer or if it was cut differently? Because they do different directs for each region, but I don't know if they cut the trailers any differently either.
Yeah, I don't know, and to me, the only reason I key in on the marketing is because the design ethos and approach of Breath of the Wild, right, was that intermix between kind of traditional Japanese approaches and what I felt was a more Western RPG approach. And I think that's a great formula. It's a blend that I don't really think is out there. I just hope that that's as far as it goes, right? I don't think Nintendo benefits by having a generation of developers and creative directors that just really like quadruple down on the Western RPG approach. I'm hoping that that intermix of the JRPG DNA kind of stays present within their game design. Although I'm not a huge JRPG fan, I also don't think that the industry is benefited by seeing everything go like in that one direction. So I definitely appreciate it. Super amped up, as you would expect I would be, by Fire Emblem Engage. Just a very strange, for a person who has just historically not been a Nintendo person, every time one of those titles comes along, I find myself like dumpster diving on it and enjoying the heck out of myself. The one thing I'll say about Fire Emblem Engage, doesn't really look like anything new, just looks like a change of setting. However, I don't know that the Fire Emblem Engage, like religiously faithful, want anything new or a new formula, and I suspect that they would react with a certain degree of outrage, right, if you just totally flip tables on them. So good on them. It's nice to see It Takes Two show up on that platform. Just may present some other options for finding people to play through that with. Tunic showing up is all well and good. I think those are kind of my big major takeaways. I don't know. Usually what I get amped for is the PC ports. And if I didn't mention it, then Sifu is the other thing that I'm super jazzed about. Finally seeing that come to the platform. Definitely a great way to play that in portable format, given that, it's something that I didn't onboard with on console. Is that game on PC?
Yes, it is on. It was an Epic Store exclusive. I don't know if it's on Steam at this point, but yes.
Okay, yeah, I will check that out, because that might be another way by which I would consume it, is if it's over on Steam.
All right, so let's dive into Microsoft that did a Tokyo Game Showcase. I personally found a whole lot to like here, but more because it was a lot of Game Pass releases for games that I knew about on other platforms and now can play through the subscription. So not a whole lot of new stuff, but more stuff kind of very Tokyo Game Show JRPG focused in terms of their content. We knew Persona 5 Royale was coming. It's coming to Game Pass. That was announced over the summer, just like Wo Long was announced over the summer. This is from the producers behind Nier. Not Nier, but Neo and Bloodborne. Kind of that Souls-like aspect to it. We get some Blaze Blue, some Guilty Gear, so you get your anime fighting aspects there. Out on Game Pass this week, the Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch remaster, which has been basically out on anything but Xbox at this point, is now here on Game Pass. Danganronpa Volume 3 is out on Game Pass, and also Fuga, Melodies of Steel, which is actually a really interesting strategy game. I played it over the summer a little bit. It's kind of like, forgive me, but it's kind of like furry Advance Wars. Like, it is Advance Wars as a roguelike, but all your characters are foxes and animals. So if you can get past that part, the strategy element are really good. They announced that there is a sequel coming in 2023 to a lot of things. We also got an announcement that Game Pass, in addition to Steam, is going to have Pal World, which was kind of the action Pokemon type of game. Then Uladin Chronicles. There was a side-scroller action one that came out this fall, but this is kind of the spiritual successor to Suikoden, is coming to Game Pass when it finally releases, who knows when. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Forza Horizon 10th year anniversary that you get. That kind of drives through. This is coming in October, kind of driving through all 4 of the previous Forza Horizon kind of theme zones. So we don't quite know how much we're going to get. We're going to get some new story, some battles, some soundtrack pieces back, some locations that take us back into Britain, Italy, France, over in Australia, related to all the previous Forza Horizons. So any thoughts either on the Horizon celebration or anything else from the Xbox showcase?
I'm jazzed on Forza. On Forza. We're kind of solidly, in my head, in the ramp to Forza Motorsport for next year, which is a series that has just been missed, right? Should have arguably been in production pipeline. Still a great mystery, kind of what went on with it and that team, and why Forza Horizon 5 was kind of pulled ahead in their kind of normal TikTok development cycle. But I'm getting a yen for, days of yesteryear, and to last tide me over until then. And so actually, I recently loaded Forza Motorsport 7 on PC, which is still an incredibly sharp-looking game on PC. And have recently been playing some of the Hot Wheels stuff for Forza Horizon 5, which has just gotten me back into that game overall. So the notion, in the previous versions are now in a state where, and I've gone back and played them over the last, couple of years, and the content's there, but the graphical updates and whatnot only go but so far. And so the notion of some chunk of the content from those previous 5 volumes now being present in the Horizon 5 engine, which isn't anything. I mean, it's been the same engine since Horizon 3, but some of those older set pieces from Forza Horizon and Forza Horizon 2 were what must have been Colorado and France, because I think I've raced everywhere else. Yeah,
I think that is correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, I haven't had a chance to really race on those. And Forza Horizon 1 was on the 360. Was where it started. So,
yeah. So was 2. Well, 2 was cross-platform?
Nope. 2 may have been 360 as well. I'm not absolutely certain. but it'll be great to get a new shine put on those, and that's again, the Forza faithful, right? That's going to give them a chunk of content that they're going to be able to play in the months from October until whenever Motorsport comes along. For the demographic that likes to play both, there's definitely that Venn diagram only goes but so far. There are some people who just love Horizon. But it kind of lends to the notion that Forza Horizon could also kind of make the transition that Halo Infinite is trying to pull off, where, I don't know that I need a brand new version of Forza Horizon every single time. And maybe it just needs to become a living game where you periodically get, feature updates in the form of content, right? Which is kind of the same way that Call of Duty has been inferring that it may go to as well. So, those are good. I'm trying to think, there wasn't, I don't know. I mean, Wolong, obviously, I'll keep an eye on that. I've heard, not particularly great things from, was there I don't know if was there a demo that's out now, or?
I don't know that there has been. I think it was one of those where when it was announced over the summer, it really was kind of a tone piece. It wasn't necessarily anything in terms of action. It was all pre-rendered cutscenes, things like that.
Yeah. So, and then the Game Pass announcement of Assassin's Creed Odyssey showing up in the service will be great for people who haven't gotten back to that, and Deathloop now being available on Xbox.
Forgot about Deathloop. Thank you for catching that. Yep.
Yeah, those two don't particularly, rock my socks off. I have Assassin's Creed already, and I have Deathloop for PC as well. So, great for other people.
Yeah, again, lots of potential games there, and a little bit of cross section on, especially. I think while it was tailored to a Tokyo Game Show type of audience, there's still, with Assassin's Creed, with Forza, there's plenty of crossover pieces there as well. So that pretty much wraps up the big pieces of Tokyo Game Show. Any other pieces from Tokyo Game Show that you wanted to touch on? But I feel like we've wrung a lot of content out of this Tokyo Game Show discussion. So.
Yep. No, I'm good. And did you have anything else to add on Capcom Resident Evil besides what you said earlier?
Nope. I'm good.
Okay, well, let's move on to the rapid fire round in segment 3, where we go through our regular rundown of other games that we've been playing that have been in the playlist rotation. First thing up is Grid Autosport, which I'm continuing to play on the Steam Deck. Again, as is my last report, I think tonight is more about the Steam Deck itself than about the title Grid. So first of all, I did not realize that the Steam Deck external output is only something like 1280 by 800p, and so if you're planning on sending that to an external monitor, it is limited. I was kind of surprised the one time I got it working going to an external monitor when Grid came up at 720p, and I just thought it was because that title's old and I didn't think it could do anymore. But it turns out the limit of the Steam Deck's graphical output is 800p. So the other thing is, right now the Steam Deck dock got shown off at TGS. Does that mean that a release is imminent? I don't know. I don't know how much, they're continuing to bake that in the oven. I bought an Anker USB to HDMI output, and like many people have been reporting, I got that to work once, and then it has not worked since. I think from all the reports that I've seen and my own personal experiences, my axe to grind about the Steam Deck is, USB-C should just work. But it's very wonky in what's been implemented. I'm not sure exactly what's kind of going on in that particular cookie mix, but it appears to be what I would contend is, I guess, a non-standard USB-C port, which maybe takes some departures from the spec. Now, this has been an ongoing issue with USB-C in the first place, particularly with phone manufacturers and tablet manufacturers and other electronic device manufacturers, and is why, when when product makers run around talking about fast charging. There is an aspect of USB-C that is part of the spec that is rapid recharge, but then some of the things that the other vendors talk about is not compliant with that spec. It's some homebrewed thing that they've thrown in on top of it. So my thing is, look, when there's a spec, and I know this is just me, and this is the engineering, but look, when there's a spec, I expect people to be compliant, and I expect it to work with things that it should work. And I don't like industrial environments where everybody's going off. We've had this problem with consoles with HDMI 2.1, where the television manufacturers have implemented it one way, the consoles have implemented it another, and then your uber slick output that you're supposed to get on your TV doesn't work until you get a firmware update. And when you get a firmware update, that's great. But like LG has put out a firmware update to make their TVs work, but yet Vizio hasn't. So people who hook up their next gen consoles to Vizio TVs still have problems. This is frustrating for me because there's no way to fix it, right? I have a Steam Deck now that seems for whatever reason to not behave consistently in outputting, USB-C, video over USB-C. Now I have since bought my own deck, my own cradle dock for this thing that again, lots of people on Amazon have reported having success with, but I'm just uncertain exactly what I'm going to get and how well it's going to work and if it's going to be consistent. So we will see. That piece of equipment is now in my state after what seems like it was trapped in customs for some period of time. So I was like, it arrived, I saw it shipping from China, and it arrived in New York like on the 8th of September, and then I've just received no update about the thing until tonight. I happened to check in on it, so it will hopefully be showing up tomorrow, and I'll get a chance. But some of these things people have utilized, and they say that it's bricked their Steam Deck. Now, I think I mentioned before, it's hard for me to kind of read through the comments and tell if they mean it really bricked their Steam Deck or if it's just the Steam Deck wouldn't work with that peripheral again a second time, or if they now have a problem charging their Steam Deck. I'm not sure. But there's been no reports of that nature with this particular dock that I bought. But my hopes are not super high that I'm going to get a consistent experience. But I do want to be able to play with my Steam Deck in external, putting out to an external monitor. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. One of the other things that I'll report along with that is, I'm building a new PC this week. It'll hopefully be my last upgrade for 2022. You can kind of see some of the parts behind me at the end of the table that's going on back there. But I also had to slide everything down kind of in the hierarchy of my studio for where that new PC is being inserted. One of those things means that the streaming PC that I was using on that side of the studio, I finally made good on one of the goals that I talked about for this year, but I backed off of it because I wasn't certain if I was getting the Steam Deck. But now that I have the Steam Deck, I have made that a Linux box for gaming. Ran into some problems getting the install. I could not get Steam OS to load. Steam OS, whether or not you do use the basic executable or the advanced executable, what it always does is after it installs, it immediately makes a backup image of the partitions. And after that, then it reboots. And after that, I was never able to get it to work. Either it rebooted and just hung after it showed the SteamOS icon on the splash page, or I saw it saying, grabbing device drivers, and then it never completed. Now I have an AMD Radeon card in that box right now, which that's one of the reasons why I wanted to build a Steam Deck, because the Radeon cards that I had in the studio, I wound up having to pull them earlier than I normally do for depreciation of capital assets like that, because I was just running into too many problems. I swapped them all out with 3000 series RTX cards, but I have been holding on to those Radeon cards because I wanted to get some use out of them. So today I actually installed Ubuntu on that box, which installed fine. I then pulled down the Linux version of Steam, which also worked fine. I then figured out how you pull down Proton with your Steam install, and then enable the option so that any game that you load There's kind of a point where you go into another dialog box and say, yeah, download all of the Proton stuff that goes along with this particular game, because there's the core of Proton, but then there may be some additional bits and bobs that need to be pulled down for any game. So I've done that, and I pulled down the proprietary drivers, the Radeon-specific drivers. Ubuntu installed kind of a stock core set of drivers that the package that is maintained as part of the package in the repo, but then AMD periodically updates those drivers, and they may be ahead of the kind of the core AMD GPU drivers. So I installed those as well. Kind of again had to knock off the dust from my Linux skill set in terms of unpackaging the tarball and allowing me to run the installation script without problems, but I rapidly remembered some stupid errors that I made because I was trying to operate the thing like a Windows box, but got that done, and so I now have Metro 2033 installed over there, as well as Project Cars. So I'm probably going to give those a whirl tonight when we get off. Other than that, Grid plays just as well as it has been on the. I was about to say the Nintendo Switch, on the Steam Deck. So it's loads of fun. Cars are very susceptible to being upset in terms of their suspension and doing bad things when you upset a car's stability. So it's nice to play the AI and see them kind of hang themselves out to dry, which is the thing that I always liked about Grid. Like, AI actually makes mistakes. And so it definitely emphasizes, kind of like the Formula One games do as well, because you never know when there's going to be a mechanical failure in front of you. But they emphasize, don't get wrapped around the axle about, like, if you're far behind in a race, keep your foot down on the gas and keep driving good laps, and you never know what might happen. So I love that experience. Another thing I've been playing, I played a chunk of this last night, and arguably way later than I should have reasonably stayed awake. I also broke out God of War 2018 on the PC. Obviously, I'm getting amped up and hyped up for God of War dropping on the PlayStation 5. Here next month, so I wanted to go back and revisit God of War. Tried to record some gameplay clips of that, and I did not realize, because I hadn't tried to record it before, that is a super CPU intensive game. So I'm running it on a box with a AMD Radeon 5600X CPU, and trying to grab game clips of it. I've got the CPU indicator up on my Elgato Stream Deck. I listened to our episode a couple weeks ago, by the way, and I realized that because of the nervousness that doing the live show imparts, I will frequently say Steam Deck or Stream Deck interchangeably, unintentionally so. So I called the Steam Deck the Stream Deck for like 10 whole minutes straight last time.
We tried not to interrupt because you were on a roll, but yes, we all noticed that. But you caught yourself eventually, so that's all that really matters.
So in this case, I mean the Stream Deck. That game pegs, somewhere between the high 40s in CPU utilization all the way up to like 85% during gameplay. So like trying to use X264, the software codec, the CPU codec, it does not work well when trying to play God of War. So it's very interesting. I haven't. I'll take a look at Death Stranding. I've recorded gameplay of before and didn't have that problem. That may be an issue of the Decima engine being more efficient in that respect. The game looks gorgeous. I mean, there's just. I haven't had a chance to look at Spider-Man, but there are a few games that look better than an SIE game on PC. I know that PC gamers have to wait for those titles to drop, up to 2 years after they release, but that doesn't make them play any worse or any less, particularly for PC gamers who don't own a PlayStation 5. So, a really, really wonderful, wonderful game. I was using it with my Thrustmaster eSwap Pro X controller, with all like the little tweaks and calibrations I can make on that controller, and that was a wonderful experience. That controller is not better than the DualSense, but it is it occupies its own unique kind of space within my controller lineup, and does things, better, or things that other controllers don't. So I had a lot of fun with that. The God of War series obviously has a long and lengthy history on the PlayStation 5. You also have been playing a game that has a long and lengthy history and pedigree on gaming platforms.
Well, at least a long history. Sometimes some quality pedigree, sometimes some questionable ones. But yes, since it is the last week was the kickoff of the NFL season, which meant it was time to start a new franchise in Madden 23. So playing that on the Xbox Series X, playing that online. Started an online league with a friend that we've been doing multiple leagues over the past few years, running on last gen. So this is the first time that we're running a new gen franchise season, and it's also the first time in a while that we have jumped in before Madden has gone free. And what that has meant is that our experience is a little rougher than what we're used to. That when you jump into a game 6 months after it's released and there's been multiple patches and it's pretty stable, it's Madden still has some bugs and quirks, but a lot of those get ironed out over the course of the football season. Starting now, there's been one patch for Madden that did some things. We ran into multiple server issues trying to get the preseason going, that we had, we'd make changes, make roster moves, advance the week, and then get disconnected from the server. And when we'd log back in, we were the previous week, and some of our moves were not there. That people were still back on our teams, our signings didn't happen. And then, we went through this cycle probably 3 times. And the 4th time we had it happen again, but then it was still the previous week, but then all the trades were there. And so it was the inconsistency there. But once we got, it's hard to tell if there are some franchise glitches out there that haven't been addressed yet. I don't think that this is one in the preseason, but most of the glitches are they are connected franchise. They are online leagues, which is problematic because you can't advance a league if it hits some of those glitches from reading in the Madden community. But we were able to, once we got through the preseason, it seems so far, we're in week 2 and it seems pretty stable. So whether it was just that evening because it was a weekend, or if it is something related to all the back end pieces that are going on, trying to calculate, season or week by week stats and things like that. Lee, what were you going to ask?
So I was going to ask, initially I was going to ask, hey, does the game allow you to do a local save, and then back those up to the cloud? I think one of the things that I have been bothered by is there are certain games somewhere within a window before, Steam has been doing cloud saves forever, but there was a very skinny window, I think, where there have been some implementations on console where you were allowed to, it wasn't either or. Like, you could have a local save, like Civilization, actually has them in 2 different sub-menu selections, right? Or you go into the save selection and then there's an additional sub-menu selection that allows you to pick cloud or on-prem. It would seem to be better to allow you to do a local save and then just back up that save to the cloud rather than have all of your saves in the cloud. But then I also realized with this, and you can go ahead and answer as I asked this as a question, but with league play and multiple people involved, how in the world would you ever arbitrate 2 different on-prem saves?
Yeah, I think that's really the key. When it is an online league, you are constantly being connected. And we've had this in years past where during the middle of a draft we'll get dropped out and have to kind of reconnect back in. And most of the time, you don't lose anything because it's been, every major pick has been saved in the cloud. So that's where this felt strange, because it wasn't, yes, we've gotten kicked out before from the servers, but not necessarily kind of rolled back on the servers as well. You can do, if you're playing a single player franchise, yeah, you can totally do that. You don't have to connect to the cloud at all. You can do that locally and kind of run that as you have and not have to worry about anything. But yeah, but by the nature of an online league, that would be really, especially an online league where you could technically have 32 people all having their own local save files seems like a infrastructure nightmare. So yeah, we will see if I'm sure as the Madden season goes on, I'll report back in terms of the stability and some of the patches that are still promised and things like that.
And then one other question I had, you mentioned, getting hit with bugs. One of the things that seems to have always been prevalent in past iterations of Madden has been, instances of periodic slowdown that there would always kind of be in the launch version. Are you seeing any of that, any hits on performance? Because that would, I think, be a little more irritating, particularly on Xbox Series X.
No, I think actually this is probably the most, I mean, in the franchise mode and in Ultimate Team, it is incredibly stable. There are some graphical glitches here that I've noticed already in franchise that other people have noticed on Reddit, but it's all like the in-between game story pieces of rookie on your team wants a breakout performance to boost their rating and their name on the back of their jersey is different, or they're wearing a practice jersey versus the team jersey. It's small stuff that doesn't actually impact on the field play. On the field play is really smooth at this point. There's still some tweaks probably to some of the D-back AI, but it also makes passing a whole lot more challenging as someone who threw 5 interceptions on my opening week. But again, that's not bad. It just changes the way that you have to play. You can't just play it on, if you could turn it to arcade, I suppose, and play it like NFL Blitz. But if you're trying to, it forces you to you have a much tighter window in the pocket, which is actually kind of fun. So no, I'm playing on performance, not on graphical, on high quality, and it's running great. And the other person in the league is running on an S, and it's been running well for him as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Next in the lineup, I've been playing Halo Infinite on PC. And so the past couple of weeks, they've been running an event called the Yappening, and I've had a good deal of fun with that. This is the interesting thing, right? Where there is still some scratch for Halo to be had, and some hopes for the future if people are kind of at a point where they're disappointed in the state of the game. The Yappening is a game that kind of takes modes and mixes them into a kind of randomized playlist on big team battle maps. And so a lot of it is Fiesta. I'm not sure how many of these modes were normally part of the big team battle rotation, but there's Fiesta and, say, Power Cell, where you have to go out, each team has to go out into the battlefield and collect 5 power cells and then bring them back to, whatever, the flux capacitor machine or whatever, and insert them. So if you kind of think of Destiny 2, where you have to go out and get, I forget what the little baubles are called.
Oh, yeah, in Gambit mode, where you've got to get the motes and
dump them. Yep. So it's very similar to that, and you go back and get them, and there's tons of vehicles on this map. It's very interesting to see certain teams that just play There was one team we were playing, and I came over a hill and looked down, and it was like a stinking armored tank platoon coming at me. Right, it's just it was 5-6 vehicles, people all stacked up on the back of warthogs and all kinds of stuff. So you get some teams that are heavy vehicular based, which is fun. I played a mode called Skockets, where everybody spawns with just skewer and rockets, and it just makes for this really calamitous kind of chaotic event. Played capture the flag modes and some other things. So this is a thing where I don't know that there was any of these things as a standalone variable. I don't know that any of them were new. But mixing them in kind of combinatorial fashion yields what feels like a completely different game. And I'm a person who doesn't like big team battle. So, for people who have played with me, I always prefer the smaller team environments of Slayer, but also some of the smaller 4-on-4 modes. I don't play big team battle. But the Yappening was an event that kind of got me out of my seat to go play it, and I had tons of fun playing it. And that's where I kind of squelched down on, look, there's a specific design ethos and a specific framework in a specific manner of living in Halo Infinite, right, as a PvP player that they're trying to emphasize, I think, and trying to get you to conform to, which is that basically they don't want anybody to be able to be a Halo player and get through all the accolades, right, of the battle pass by doing nothing but playing Team Slayer, right, every night, and then on top of that to then play Team Slayer only on the maps that you want to. There is a forceful hand here in saying, look, if you're gonna do the stuff and get the stuff, you're gonna play a little bit of everything. And I realize and I get that that's irritating to a lot of people, and I realize and I get that even for people who would enjoy some of it, that there's a loss of freedom and a removal kind of your own provenance, right, from the player. I get that. I also think, one of the problems is that 343i, I don't think it's been great at transparency, right, about communicating that. But it's hard for me to believe that that's not intentional, given the framework that there is within the game. They're kind of clearly saying, look, we're going to cordon you into these routes and paths and kind of, look, you don't like playing big team battle? You're going to have to play big team battle if you want all the awards from the event. And so I think that's cool to a certain extent. I think that's incumbent upon you to explain that to everyone and not have us just all figure it out on our own, because you're going to have some people like me who get that, look, with every game, there's going to be a framework and a design ethos and an architectural intent. Just like I used to say about Apex, people used to, wail and gnash teeth about, this game doesn't have a solo mode. I'm like, look at the game. They specifically designed the game to not allow you to play as a lone wolf, right? They're forcing you to play in a team and giving you all sorts of tools to be able to communicate with a team, even if you're not on a headset. So clearly enabling a solo mode is kind of antithetical to that approach. So, I've had a great time with it. I know some other people, don't grok with it, but the yappening was a good time. Let's see if they can keep it up. And then I've also been playing Ratchet Clank, the 2016 version on the PlayStation 5, which I did not play on the PlayStation 4. I briefly went and looked at this. I didn't break that egg apart in vast detail. I am admittedly not entirely clear on what the difference is between this game and kind of the upgrade path you have similar to Xbox, but I don't know that PlayStation does as good a job messaging it and making it clear. The PlayStation 5 implements some things where a backwards compatible game is just going to get some enhancements and upgrades just by nature of being delivered across that fabric, right? And so, but on Xbox, you have frame boost and auto HDR and a lot of other things that are going to make an older game look better. PlayStation does the same things. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if I understand the tea leaves on this, they went back and specifically did some direct PlayStation 5 enhancements on Ratchet and Clank that further that experience.
Yep.
Okay.
That was the case. That came out shortly thereafter of the PlayStation 5 release. I think just that winter afterward. Yes, where it does have HDR, it does have a number of frame rate boosts and other pieces there.
Yep, so I've been playing it at 4K 60 and I guess quality mode, which is the way that I play it on my 4K on my TV. Although my Xbox, I tend to play more so in performance mode. But this was a game that I slept on very clearly in the PlayStation 4 generation that I'm very pleased with. PlayStation 5, and it looks great. Like, I opened the game up and I'm like, when did this game come out? This is a last gen game. And I'm not a super huge fan of third-person action-adventure games, but I really am enjoying Ratchet and Clank and all the voice talent that they had in the game. So, of course, this was a thing that was supposed to go hand-in-hand with the movie. I think at the end of the day, the movie wound up coming out, and then the game came out like a year later or something like that. So looking forward to spending some more time with this game that's obviously in PlayStation Plus Premium. It may be at some lower tiers. I don't know, but
yeah, it's in all the tiers. So
okay.
if you have even the base PlayStation Plus, it's there.
Okay, very cool. But definitely a game worth checking out and looping back to if you didn't play it. Again, I can't emphasize enough how graphically impressive it looks like for a PlayStation 4. It looks like a PlayStation 5 game. To me, so and the gameplay is really awesome as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I played it, played a little bit of it this spring, on PlayStation 5 just to see those enhancements. And yeah, in part it's the art design, right? It's that art design allows, because it is cartoony, it allows that it doesn't feel as dated and it really upscales nicely. So speaking of dated, I will hit my last game here as we wrap things up, but I have been playing this since it released at the end of August. So this is the Cowabunga collection, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Cowabunga collection. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it here. I know that I'm going to talk about it more as the fall goes on. I am chipping away at it because there's lots of games here. There's 13 different games here. Nintendo, Genesis, Super Nintendo, arcade, and Game Boy games all here. And as someone who, this package is just excellent. Digital Eclipse did a great job of bringing in all kinds of design documents and cartoon stills and clips from all kinds of different ads across the world for these different games. And so you get Japanese ads, you get European ads. You can see the difference in how things were marketed over time, and then you get a loving recreation or a loving port of all these games, and with the ability to turn on some enhancements like some smoother frame rates. You don't get the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 on the Nintendo. The arcade game had a lot of screen flicker because it was an NES game and it was throwing a lot at it, and so you can smooth out some of that as well. But if you have any fondness or nostalgia for any of those kind of early 90s Turtles games, this package is just is a dream come true. As somebody who owned the original Game Boy game TMNT, somebody who played a whole lot of quarters into the original arcade game, and somebody who bought a NES Advantage joystick specifically at Christmas time so that he could play TMNT, the arcade game, when it came to Nintendo, right? So I am the target audience for this. I completely agree, but they've done a really good job of, even from a preservation standpoint, there's a lot here to appreciate. And that's nice as well. Even if you don't appreciate or, don't enjoy the game types in terms of brawlers, things like that.
Very cool. So, given that this is a brawler, if you had to make a pick between playing Avengers or this game on a single given night, which one would you pick?
I have consistently picked TMNT Cowabunga Collection. I have brought back up Avengers this month because they were doing a 2-year anniversary thing and some double XP and some special things, but it is, I'm not going to go there with Avengers. I'm just going to say Cowabunga Collection has a lot more variety than Avengers.
Yeah, to make it a little more fair, how about this versus Marvel Ultimate Alliance? Any game in the series?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would take this over Ultimate Alliance 3, which I was not a big fan of. The original Ultimate Alliance is pretty good. I think the benefit of this collection is that you get not only the brawlers, but then like the Game Boy games were a little more side-scroller action, a little bit. Even the third Game Boy game is a little Metroidvania. So there's that piece of it. I think if I had people to play together with, sitting around a couch and playing 4 people with Ultimate Alliance, sure. I think the really tough challenge here is this collection versus Shredder's Revenge, which released earlier in the summer, which is just a beautifully smooth, fluid, combo-based love letter and advancement of this TMNT brawler kind of style. So both games are excellent.
Very cool, very cool. So next week we will be back, and one of the things we will be doing is reporting out on our Pickz Plays assignment. If you're not familiar with the show, what we do is every month we assign each other some homework to do, and so in the background while the co-hosts are playing whatever mixture of games they choose to, they also have one game type, game association that they also have to play in order to turn that assignment in at the end of the month. And so next week, episode 260, we will be reporting out on the assignment as follows. Pick a game from your Steam catalog. You know, you have a large one that you have never played before, or maybe only about an hour of playtime and jump back into. If you had played it before, did you stop because of a specific reason? Or if it's totally new to you, was it worth the purchase or download if it was free? And so DBQ Hams will be hosting that episode, trying to manage Master and I to keep from fighting about our whatever difference of opinion we had on what we picked, what we went after, challenging each other to see if we got outside of our box, if he picked something other than an RTS in his Steam backlog, and to see if I picked anything other than a racing game in my Steam backlog. But we will see how that goes. DBQ, anything else to add for tonight?
No, I think this was a good conversation. Lots to cover in terms of Tokyo Game Show. So thanks for the rundown.
Thank you. I appreciate you always come in with a nicely cataloged and indexed list, particularly when I was only able to pay tangential attention to TGS, particularly this year. So thank you. I think our next... Do we have any other big game shows this year, or is it pretty much time to bite the bullet and start prepping for gaming superlatives? Yeah,
I think so. I think TGS is really the last one here. So, I mean, until we get around to the Game Awards, which hits in December or late November, depending on when Keeley has his award.
I think it hits like first week-ish of... I think the cutoff tends to be the first week and a half of November. And then all their votes and whatever happen, you know, as we cut across the Thanksgiving holiday, and then the show's like the first week of December. But which typically tends to push a lot of us into a frenzy to declare our own gaming superlatives, because I know a lot of us will try and declare our own personal picks before the VGAs so that we're not influenced by any of those. But we will start that administrative wrap-up next week. Unfortunately, I mean, to be quite honest, I mean, just given, you know, some of the review data, right, the crop of games this year is not as many. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how this one goes down. But thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in for tonight. Hopefully you will be back next week for episode number 260, again, hosted by DBQ Hams, where we will be reporting out on our Pickz Plays assignment, as well as our other three normal segments of anything new-ish that we've been playing, industry news, and then the rundown wrap up of everything else that we've been playing. So until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, and come here to talk about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Lee Hampton on the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG network here on YouTube. My co-host tonight, DBQ Hams. Master should be back with us next week, and we will have all three Musketeers in-house. So until then, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.